this might be a little bit of a hard one to review. But, I will say this. It is very good. Don't think that just because I'm going to be a bit more critical with this one, that I don't think that it's a good movie. No, we haven't really hit a bad movie yet in this marathon, and we literally just started, so... Welcome back to DC Live, welcome back to Animation Station, welcome to Superman Doomsday, the first of the DC animated universe films. Or at least according to the internet, it's the first one. It takes kind of the animation of Superman the Animated Series and turns it into a feature-length film adapting one of his most well-known and tragic storylines. You know, the death of Superman at the hands of the death of Superman storyline at the hands of Doomsday. But, this one's going to be a bit hard to explain, not only because you're talking to someone who's not the biggest fan of Superman, so there's that, but also because you also tell me that this is PG-13. And if you've actually read the comic book, yeah, that's an R rating at least. So, yeah, that's one big problem I can point out about this movie right off the bat. And the second big problem, yes, I'm starting with the flaws first, because this is a very good movie I want to spend a decent time talking about, is the second half of the movie. It is an absolute incomprehensible mess. So, here's the basic gist of the story. You have not even the first half, it's like, not even the first half, it's like the first half hour of the movie. You have Superman and Lois, being Superman and Lois as you expect, and then some of the LexCorp people end up finding this thing on the ground, and they accidentally set free Doomsday. And then Superman comes in, they have their fight, and he dies in the battle. That's all in the first 30 minutes. It gets to the point very quickly. But then you get to the second half of the movie, and Lex Luthor makes a clone of Superman, and that clone starts to develop its own consciousness and starts acting irrationally by murdering people, saying that he's protecting Metropolis and pretty much sustaining Superman's image. Meanwhile, while this is all happening, it turns out Superman is not dead, and he gets revived by his robot in the Fortress of Solitude. Yes, it's a literal robot. And he has long hair now, and he's pretty much stuck in stasis. And then we have this other Superman that's still trying... Well, he's doing what he thinks is right to protect Metropolis. And, yeah, his methods are not very civil. This is pretty much Superman if he was raised by Lex Luthor. But then he's also not under Lex Luthor's control. So it's like, well, what's the point here? And then he starts killing more people, and then the actual Superman has to come back before he's fully healed using a gun. Yeah, he tries to use a gun. That might be one of the most boneheaded things he's ever tried. But somehow, with the help of Lois, he ends up defeating this evil Superman, and yeah, pretty much things go back to normal, and Superman reveals that he's Clark Kent to Lois. That's pretty much the whole story, but that whole second half, it has so much going on, and it just gets really messy. If you try to actually make sense of most of it, it's going to make your brain hurt. Then again, when you actually read the comic books, where there's Cyborg Superman and a bunch of other different Supermen before the actual Superman comes back, yeah, that whole thing is even more messy than the movie. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's better than the comic. It's still very messy, though. And the writing does not help much, because the writing in that second half is, for lack of a better term, it's pretty damn bad. It does a very, very poor job of trying to actually sell what's going on here and when it tries to actually make some sort of sense, it ends up just becoming even messier. So, yeah, the whole second half of the movie is an absolute mess when you look at it through a story perspective. And I complained about this with Batman vs. Dracula. I have to complain about it here as well. As much as I love 2D traditional animation, and it's great to see it, especially nowadays when it's dominated by 3D animation, it also has its fair share of budget moments. Like, moments where you can tell that it was a little bit on the rush side. But just like with Batman vs. Dracula, it's not like immersion breaking or super noticeable. It's just something that does kind of show itself throughout the movie. Not to mention, they also throw in some unnecessary characters like Toyman, voiced by John DiMaggio. Pretty much there to be the catalyst for this Dark Superman not being the real Superman, as this Dark Superman sees that this guy managed to actually kill one of the kids. Yeah, there's child murder. That's a little dark. So, what does that Superman do? He flies off to the police station, grabs the Toyman, flies up, and literally just drops him on a car to his death, where he's left in a bloody heap on a policeman's car. Like, outside, like, it's just a here 1 minute, gone the next minute. Like, the character is absolutely pointless. And yeah, that's another big problem with this movie. Most of the characters that aren't Superman, Lois, Lex, or Dark Superman, or Jimmy Olsen, are pretty much pointless, and they do pretty much nothing. Like, Martha Wayne barely gets any time to shine. She gets one great scene with Lois I'll talk about later. But, like, all the other people in here, like, all the bystanders and the head of the Daily Planet, like, they don't get anything to do. The military, the police, they're just there for the sake of being there. And it just feels like they could have been cut out of the movie entirely. So, yeah, that's the problems with this movie. Messy second half, that second half having bad writing, some animation showing its cheapness, and characters being unnecessary. That's literally all my flaws. Now let's get to the actual good stuff in the movie, because there's a lot of really good stuff in here. But first, as always, let's start with our voice cast. If I scroll back up here. First up, we have Adam Baldwin as the voice of Superman. He's a bit on the flat side, but he's still pretty good. You have James Marsters voicing Lex Luthor. He is a really, really good Lex Luthor. Then you have Tom Kenny back again, but he just voices the little ant robot thing what was his name? Toyman. The Toyman drives around. Like, it's Tom Kenny. It's Tom Kenny. Then we have Cree Summer as Mercy Graves. She's okay. Adam Wiley as Jimmy Olsen is pretty good here. A lot better than I was expecting. Not that the voice actor's bad, I'm just not that big of a fan of that character. Hetty Lynn Hertz is the voice of the newscaster. She does okay. Townsend Coleman is the voice of the drill operator. He's okay. Kevin Smith, yes, that Kevin Smith, is the voice of a grumpy man. He's literally called Grumpy Man in the comic. In the in the credits. Thank you. In the credits, he's literally called Grumpy Man, and has like one or two lines. Like, it's funny, but could have left that out. Then there's Anne Hetch, who voices Lois Lane. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. She's a great Lois Lane. Like, she's accurate to the character. The voice sounds like Lois. Yeah, she does a great job as Lois. Probably the best part of the movie. Then there's John DiMaggio as Toyman. He does a great job as Toyman, but you can kind of tell it's sort of just a slight retweaking of his Bender voice from Futurama. Like, is that just me? I can't be the only one getting that vibe. But yeah, like I said, the character himself barely does anything. So, it's cool that he's in here, but the character barely does anything, so it's not really worth caring about. Then there's Swoosie Kurtz, the voice of Martha Kent. She does a really good job for the little bit that she's given. Like, she barely gets to do anything. Ray Wise is the voice of Perry White, the head of the Daily Planet. Again, another character that doesn't really get to do much, but he does a good job with his role. Chris Cox as Damon Swank is okay, even though, again, barely gets to do anything. James Arnold Taylor is the voice of Officer Tucker. He's okay. And Kimberly Brooks as Murphy is okay. And before you ask why Doomsday isn't in the credits here, it's because Doomsday has no voice. Like, they don't even credit anyone for doing the roaring sound effects or stuff like that. So, yeah. Overall, it's a solid voice cast. I definitely think that Anne Heche as Lois is the star of this feature. And then Alec Baldwin is a good... Not Alec, Adam. Adam Baldwin is a good Superman, if a bit flat. And James Marsters is a great Lex Luthor. So, those three pretty much carry the entire movie. And as for the actual fight that Superman has with Doomsday in that first half hour of the movie, it's really good. Like, it's a really good fight, and you do get to see some brutality. But, again, if you compare it to the comic books, it's not that brutal. Like, in the comic books, Superman fights Doomsday for a long time. You see a lot of bloodshed, and pretty much the entirety of Superman's suit is ripped away throughout the battle. When there's just, like, a little bit left here going down, and then the rest of him, there's pretty much nothing. Like, it doesn't have that kind of brutality, but it's still a pretty good fight for the small bit that's in it. And Doomsday's design, Doomsday's design's really good. Lex Luthor here is pretty good. I do like what they tried to do with this character, even though it ended up making the plot messy, but it's fine. But I feel like the best part of this movie is what happens after Superman dies, before that messy second half comes in. That little bit right here in between the first and the second half, this little bit right here, where we see how the characters deal with Superman's death. Like, it's pretty well done. Like, we see everyone in mourning, we see that how much it affects Lois, how badly it affects Jimmy being the one that had the camera and was taking pictures of his literal death. Like, that's pretty traumatizing. And, like, just that part. This movie's more of a character piece than it is about, fights and action like you'd expect a Superman movie to be. Which, I know sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing in this case, because it really makes you feel for the characters. It really makes you understand their dilemma and understand their decisions. Again, for the most part, besides the people that barely do anything. But for the main characters, it's really good here. And while it was definitely a bit fumbled in the execution, I do like the concept of a darker clone of Superman who's pretty much taking Batman's mythology, where he has to be brutal and not abide by the law. Not be the Superman that we're used to. And again, while it doesn't have the brutality of the comic books, it's still pretty brutal here. There's one scene in particular where Doomsday grabs Superman by his head, keeps punching him in the chest, and then when he puts him down, he just spits out a huge pool of blood. Like, that one part was the part I was just like, whoa. Okay, this is brutal. But again, the comic books did it better. But this isn't really meant to one-up the comics. It's more trying to be a faithful adaptation of the comics, while also doing its own unique thing to try and stand out. And I feel like, for the most part, this movie really does succeed at that. I know this movie reviews probably sounds very mixed, because I spent so much time talking about negatives, but trust me when I say this is still a really good movie, and a really good Superman movie. I think the fans will be pleased with this one. And if you haven't seen it yet, even if you're not a fan of Superman, I still say give it a look. It's a tale of tragedy, but also really great characters. Like, so well done here. I really enjoyed this one. And while, again, it has a bunch of problems, like a whole flip ton of problems, I would still go so far as to call this movie very good, almost great. Like, if that if that second half wasn't so messy and the writing didn't decide to just nosedive, that if that part was fixed, this would have been an 8. It would have been up there with Batman versus Dracula. But for me, it's just a little bit below it, and it kind of averages out to the same score I gave Batman v Superman: The Ultimate Cut. But trust me when I say this is way better than Batman vs Superman in every single way. So yeah, it's a pretty solid start to the DC Universe animated movie filmography, but it's just not perfect, and I can't quite call it great, but I still think you're really going to like this one. I think it's a really good, enjoyable, entertaining movie, and it's not even an hour and a half. Like, it's barely over an hour. So, it's not like you're wasting too much of your time with it if you end up not liking it. I definitely think it's worth at least one watch, and if you're a Superman fan, you'll probably get a lot more out of it than most people. There is some gruesome parts. I just wish you could really go all the way with it, but this is DC's first animated film, so of course they were limited with what they could do, but overall, my final verdict for Superman Doomsday is going to be a solid 7 out of 10. This is a very good Superman movie, and again, if that second half wasn't so messy, I would have been nicer and gave it an 8, but it's not quite there. It's a very good movie. I definitely recommend you give it a look, and if you're a Superman fan, I think you're really going to enjoy it. Not as great as the comic that tries to take inspiration from, but it's still a really good, entertaining film that's short, sweet, and to the point. So, yep, that's going to do it. I know this review's not nearly as long as the Batman Dracula one, but this one I kind of have a bit less to say. So, yeah, if you're a fan of Superman, absolutely check this one out. If you're a DC fan, check this one out. If you're an animation fan, I still think it's worth at least one watch. And if you're part of the casual viewers that's not really into comic books or anything like that, well, why are you watching this movie in the first place? So, yeah, I definitely recommend it. Give it at least one watch and make your own conclusions. But that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Animation Station. And stay tuned because we still have 16 more DC animated films to go through before we have to switch gears to, something else. I'm not going to say what it is, just something else. So, I will see you guys tomorrow when we revisit our favorite Cape Crusader with Batman Mask of the Phantasm.